Nama Sankshana Dhimahi Jumnani. My Lord, Namaha Tubhyam, unto you, Bhagavate, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vasudevaya, Krishna, the son of Vasudeva. Dhimahi, let me meditate upon. Prajumnaya, unto Prajumna. Anirudaya, unto Aniruddha. Namaha, respectful obeisances. Sankashanaya, unto Lord Sankashan. Cha, also. Namaha, all obeisances. Vijnanamatraya, unto the form full of knowledge. Paramanandamurtaye, full of transcendental bliss. Atmaramaya, unto the Lord who is self-sufficient. Shantaya, and free from disturbances. Nivrittadvaita dristaye, whose vision turns away from duality, or who is one without a second. Translation. Narad gave Chitraketu the following mantra. O Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, who are addressed by the Omkara Pranav, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. O Lord Vasudeva, I meditate upon you. O Lord Prajumna, Lord Aniruddha, and Lord Sankashan, I offer you my respectful obeisances. O reservoir of spiritual potency, O supreme bliss, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, who are self-sufficient and most peaceful. O ultimate truth, one without a second, you are realized as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, and are therefore the reservoir of all knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Prabhupada ki jai. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that his pranav sarva vedeshu, the syllable Om in the Vedic mantra. In transcendental knowledge, the Lord is addressed as pranav Omkara, which is a symbolic representation of the Lord in sound. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudeva, who is an expansion of Narayan, expands himself as Prajumna, Aniruddha, and Sankashan. From Sankashan comes a second Narayan expansion, and from this Narayan come further expansions of Vasudeva, Prajumna, Sankashan, and Aniruddha. The Sankashan in this group is the original cause of the three Purushas, namely Kshirodakashaya Vishnu, Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, and Kshirodakashaya Vishnu. Karandakashaya Vishnu. Kshirodakashaya Vishnu is situated in every universe in a special planet called Sweta Dweep. This is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita, Adantara star. The word Anda means this universe. Within this universe is a planet called Sweta Dweep, where Kshirodakashaya Vishnu is situated. From him come all the incarnations within this universe. As confirmed in the Brahma Samhita, all these forms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are Advaita, non-different, and they are also Achyuta, infallible. They do not fall down like the conditioned souls. The ordinary living entity is prone to falling into the clutches of Maya, but the Supreme Lord, in his different incarnations and forms, is Achyuta, infallible. Therefore, his body is different from the material body possessed by the conditioned soul. The word matra is explained in the Medini dictionary as follows. Matra kana vibhushayam viti male parichade. The word matra in its different imports is used to indicate the decoration of the ear, possession, respect, and possession of a covering, as stated in Bhagavad Gita. Vasas to Kontaya, Sitoshna, Sukadukada, Agama Pagino Nichas, Tams Titikshasva Bharata. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O sign of Bharat, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. In the conditioned state of life, the body is used as our dress, and as one needs different dresses during the summer and winter, we, conditioned souls, are changing bodies according to our desires. However, because the body of the Supreme Lord is full of knowledge, it needs no covering. The idea that Krishna's body is like ours, in other words, that his body and soul are different, is a misunderstanding. There are no such differences for Krishna, because his body is full of knowledge. Here we receive material bodies because of a lack of knowledge. But because Krishna Vasudeva is full of knowledge, there is no difference between his body and his soul. Krishna remembers what he said 40 million years ago to the sun god, but an ordinary being cannot remember what he said the day before. He said the day before yesterday. This is the difference between Krishna's body and our body. Therefore, the Lord is addressed as Vijnana Matraya Paramananda Murtaye. Because the Lord's body is full of knowledge, he always enjoys transcendental bliss. Indeed, his very form is Pramananda. This is confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra, Anandamaya Abhyasat. By nature, the Lord is Anandamaya. Wherever we see Krishna, he is always full of Ananda in all circumstances. No one can make him morose. Atmaramaya. He does not need to search for external enjoyment because he is self-sufficient. Shantaya. He has no anxiety. One who has to seek pleasure from other sources is always full of anxiety. Karmis, Jnanis, and yogis are full of anxiety because they want something. But a devotee does not want anything. He is simply satisfied in the service of the Lord, who is fully blissful. Nivritta Dvaita Drishtaye. In our conditioned life, our bodies have different parts, but although Krishna apparently has different bodily parts, no part of his body is different from any other part. Krishna can see with his eyes, and Krishna can see without his eyes. Therefore, in the Svetasvatara Upanishad, it is said, Pajyatya Yachakshu, he can see with his hands and legs. He does not need a particular bodily part to perform a particular action. Angani Yashasakarlin Sakalarendriya Manti. He can do anything he desires with any part of his body, and therefore he is called Almighty. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupagadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Srivasadi Gaura Bhattarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So Krishna's God. Any questions? So King Chitraketu is mercifully instructed by Angira and Narad, sons of Brahma, and Narada Muni also gives him a mantra. And so this is the king's ticket home back to Godhead, just like we've been given a mantra, the Hare Krishna mantra. And we've been asked to just chant this mantra, and we will attain perfection. That is our main means. We may do so many other things. We may distribute books and paintings of Krishna and peel potatoes and set fire to things like I was doing yesterday. or whatever it is you're doing. But everything is a waste of time if it doesn't help you to chant Hare Krishna. Chanting mantra. So here the mantra is, I'm not sure which yuga this was in that the mantra was given, but for Kali Yuga, the Maha Mantra is especially empowered by the mercy of Lord Nityananda. And we were just hearing the other day that Raghunath Das was considered a thief because he was trying to steal Lord Chaitanya and Radha and Krishna, who are the property of Lord Nityananda. So if you want the Shakti to chant Hare Krishna, then you need the mercy of Lord Nityananda. And if you try and go directly to Krishna or Lord Chaitanya, then you'll be considered a thief. So who's ever been doing that, they should organize a chip rice festival to atone for their offense. So King Chitraketu was given a mantra, and this chapter is entitled King Chitraketu Meets the Lord. So obviously the mantra was successful. So that's what we're supposed to be doing actually when we're chanting, meeting the Lord. So then Srila Prabhupada is explaining how the different incarnations, how they expand. And there's 2 quadruple expansions, 2 Sankarsans. And then there's one Sankarshan, which is Shardakashaya Vishnu, and he's in every universe in the island called Swaitadweep. And I was just reading last night in the Mahabharata, there was 4 sages, one of them was Brihaspati, and 3 others, and they wanted to see the Lord in Swaitadweep, but when they went to Swaitadweep, there was a problem. It was so effulgent that they couldn't see anything. So they decided to do austerities for 100 years, and then they were able to see this amazing effulgent form, and it was the Lord. So don't be discouraged if you're sitting there chanting Hare Krishna and you're finding it a little bit difficult to do, because even though they were doing the right thing and they were in the right place, they had to do it for 100 years before the Lord was going to reveal himself. So that takes a certain amount of faith and determination. I'm going to do this chanting, and right now I'm not able to appreciate that this is none different from the Lord, but I'm prepared to undergo the long haul to the point where Krishna will reveal himself. Swayam eva spurat yada. Swayam is the personality, Ada means everything connected with, and spurat is an interesting word. Spurat is to manifest. Suddenly everything just explodes into your consciousness. And you can't force Krishna to spurat. Krishna will spurat whenever he wants. We're just trying to invoke Swayam eva, Krishna and all his... See, when Krishna appears, he doesn't just appear on his own either. Krishna, his qualities, his devotees, his pastimes, Guna, Rupa, Leela, they all appear also. But that may take some time. As Srila Prabhupada said to Narayan, Srila Prabhupada was chanting very powerfully, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram. And then he would turn round. As he turned round, his back would spin in the air. And he came back down past Narayan Rishi, Hare Krishna, Hare. Narayan Rishi was looking at Prabhupada, he went, Prabhupada, do you think I could become a pure devotee? And Prabhupada stopped and looked at him. And he said, yes. And then he went, Hare Krishna, Krishna. And he got to the end of the room and he turned around and then he said, but it may take some time. So it won't happen immediately. Hopefully not 100 years. At least something significant should happen once every 28 days, because it takes 28 days to form a habit. So if you chant bad rounds for more than 28 days, you could be doing that for the rest of your life. So you've got 28 days from whenever was the last time you had a good japa session to get back into it. Otherwise, you can get to the point, Mahaprabhu says, where a devotee thinks that it's not going to get much better than this. And then if you don't think it's going to get much better than this, you're not going to try very hard, are you? You think, oh, well, I'm not going to make it anyway. So you have to make the endeavor with confidence that you can do this. So We have our mantra. Then Srila Prabhupada is saying an interesting thing. Matra smartest Konteya. He says this word matra, which is used in the verse at the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress. One must learn to tolerate without being disturbed. So the tolerate, we all have to tolerate. You don't have a choice, do you? You can't not tolerate. Don't go and say, I'm not tolerating this weather. But what you do have a choice over it is whether or not you're going to become disturbed. And sometimes what causes a disturbance is we're always making plans about how things are going to happen in the future. And Harikay Swami one time, he says, everyone's asking me, I'm worried about what's going to happen in the future. And he said, I tell them, what's going to happen in the future is you're going to grow old and die. That's what's going to happen in the future. So you don't have to worry about it. But what you do have to worry about is what part are you playing in the plan, in the Lord's plan? And we want to be part of the plan. We don't want to impose our plan. And that's the other challenge. There's a book called Easy Journey to Other Planets. And there's another book called Easy Journey to Other Temples. And it's a type of devotee that doesn't settle, and he goes from temple to temple. And he has his plan, but he's not quite sure what Krishna's plan is. So if we can align ourselves with Krishna's plan, there's a very nice letter by Srila Prabhupada, and he says, the secret of Krishna consciousness is to accept that wherever I am, in whatever situation, is Krishna's special mercy upon me. Well, we could be thinking, oh, I don't like this temple. I look at him over there, he's too fat. And that one, he has a big nose. And I don't like the weather here. I don't like the prasadam. I'm off. And then we go to another temple. And then we find someone else who's fat. And somebody else with a big nose. And the prasadam's not that brilliant there either. So then we hop off to the next temple. And then 40 temples later, we start thinking, maybe I'm the fat one. Maybe I've got a big nose. Maybe I don't appreciate prasadam. So if we can learn to tolerate without being disturbed, then we're on the path to experiencing our blissful nature. Because Krishna's Atma Rama, he doesn't have to look for anything. He's already happy inside. And Vaisheshika Prabhu was making a nice point. He was saying there was a deer that was running everywhere to try and smell this musk, because it gives off this smell, which is an amazing smell. So the deer was running everywhere to try and find where the source of this musk was. But the musk was coming from him. And in the same way, people are running around trying to find happiness. But the reason why they're trying to find happiness is because they have a desire for happiness in the first place. And if they can go internally, then they'll find that that happiness is already there. It's a God-given right. Viktor Frankl calls it the last human freedom. He was lying naked one time in a room. All his friends and relatives had been tortured to death in a Nazi camp. And he was lying there in the room. And he suddenly realized the one last human freedom that nobody can take away is your right to be happy. So he decided, okay, I'm going to cheer up and I'm going to look on the bright side. So he was telling his friends, just cheer up, we'll be out soon. I'm going to be in front of an auditorium with 500 people and I'm going to tell them how I got through this. And that's exactly what happened. And he wrote a book about it as well. However, because the body of the Supreme Lord is full of knowledge, it needs no covering. So then Krishna, Srila Prabhupada's just drawn the distinction. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadya Jaitan Vyadhitaratesh Jatis Swagat. The Lord's body is Abhigya, which is cognizant, and it's Swarat, which means it's independent. So the Lord can walk up to a cliff, then he can step off the cliff, and he stays in midair, because the law of gravity doesn't apply to the Lord. So that's the difference between the Lord. And he's Abhigya, he's conscious of everything. And we're not even conscious, we're not even really conscious of what's going in our own bodies, what's happening. We're not conscious of how the hair's coming out our head, or how the fingernails are growing out the ends of our fingers. I mean, how much are we really conscious of what's going on in the body? Not so much. We're maybe conscious of how full the belly is. and not even that. And the Lord is conscious of everything. And he's not limited by time. He's conscious of everything, everywhere, in the past and in the future, and now all simultaneously. Which is amazing, isn't it? I mean, that's overwhelming. That's like a tsunami of information. How to be able to cope with all that information. And that's why the Lord expands himself. Okay, Sankashan, Aniruddha, Pradyumna, and then they take care of the different aspects of the creation. Shavdashaya Vishnu goes into all the hearts of the living entities. Everything is coordinated and systematic. And then Krishna can just play with his friends. And sometimes that's interfered with. Lord Brahma came down to offer prayers, and all the demigods are there, and they're all offering prayers. And Krishna's, it's kind of interfering with his pastime, so he's kind of like, and then one of the cowherd boys comes up and bats Krishna's peacock feather because there's a bit of dust in the peacock feather, and all the demigods are like, that's the Supreme Lord, you know. And Krishna can't wait for them all to go so he can get on with his fun, with his friends. So anyway, we need to learn to tolerate. And so we receive material bodies because of a lack of knowledge. So that's interesting that depending on how much we are in ignorance determines the type of body. And the more we're in knowledge, then the less chance of a body, or the body becomes subtle. Like Lord Brahma's body is just made of intelligence. The bodies on the fire planet are made of fire. So on the gross Bhumia planet Bhumi, our bodies are predominantly made of earth, which is quite gross. The grossest element, earth, possessing smell. The other elements don't possess smell. Only earth has got smell. So it's the smelliest, grossest one. But the next one up from that is water. Water doesn't have smell. It has taste. And fire doesn't have taste. It has form, like water, but no smell, like earth. So as the elements become finer, eventually we come to consciousness. Consciousness is the finest element. And the most powerful. So Krishna is aware of what happened 40 million years ago, and we're not aware of what happened yesterday, or even really aware of what's going on right now. It's funny, sometimes you see people and they're having an argument in the pub, and they're talking about something, you know. And all they're doing really is they're all arguing about which newspapers they've been reading, because nobody knows really what's going on. One read this in a newspaper, one heard that on a conspiracy theory, and then they're all arguing as if they are fully cognizant. So whenever we see Krishna, he's always happy. He never looks morose. You never see Krishna smoking a cigarette. And he's satisfied. So the devotee is also satisfied in the service of the Lord. So the nature of devotional service is that as we render service to Krishna, Krishna shares the bliss and satisfaction that he's experiencing with his servants also. Just like when the king is served nicely by the servants, then after the king's eaten, the servants are able to enjoy his remnants. And it's a much higher caliber than if the servants said, oh, I'm fed up with serving the king, I'm out to go and fend for myself. And he has to eat wherever he buys at Tesco's or whatever it is. But if he stays with the king, he gets all the really good stuff. So he's more satisfied. Any questions or comments? Yes, Laura Mataji.
Hare Krishna, thank you for a really nice class. You were talking about Krishna's plan and how we have our own plan as well, but how much should we execute our own? We have our own free will, so how much should we execute our own free will towards what we feel our plan is, and how much should we just wait, just wait to see?
Well, it's interesting with plans. Sometimes with plans you have to be a little bit patient because it's hard to see what the plan is. But it's always really easy to see what the plan is in hindsight. So if you were to go back, say, 2 years and we asked, what are your plans? And you said, well, I'm going to do this and this is going to happen and this is going to happen. And now you look back on it and you realize, no, it's not. It's not how I planned it at all. But in hindsight, you look back and realize, well, I had this plan, but actually that wouldn't have been so good. But the way things have worked out have been really good. But you would only know that if you were patient enough. And the problem with an easy journey to other temples is you're not willing to go the course to see how the plan is going to unfold. So you just go off and do something. I'm going to go to Australia and sell magazines on a corner shop, and you do something totally out of context with what you're doing normally, so then you don't get really a chance to see how everything's going to unfold. Whereas if you're just plodding along methodically and doing what you're doing and allowing everything to unfold, then Krishna can put you in the right place, in the right time, in the right situation, And I've been seeing that happening a lot with devotees. What I noticed actually, which is really funny, I noticed this happened also. We used to sell oil paintings to people. And we used to find when we were back the next year, it was Arjuna and Krishna especially noticed it because he used to do some really big sales. And he'd say the ones that gave a lot to Krishna when they were buying the painting, a lot went on in their lives, things went wrong, the business crashed or the wife ran off, so many things. Krishna stepped in and everything changed. And kind of ruined all his material comforts so that the person could be more inclined to accept the path of devotional service, or at least some kind of path of renunciation. And I've seen with the devotees as well, when I've been doing japa sanghas, that as the devotees are starting to get more into their japa, suddenly their plans break up even more. Krishna starts getting into the picture more and more, and it's like, no, I don't think that's going to be a good idea. No, you seem quite serious about this. So, sorry, that's not going to happen. And you wouldn't know, I'm sorry, that's going to be a distraction. You want to get into your chanting, okay, I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to remove that. Now, you wouldn't know at the time, you'd be thinking, oh, what's going on here, But as you continue with your chanting and you get more committed to the process of chanting, more and more you start seeing, wow, that's Krishna's hand. I can't see Krishna's face, but wow, I can see his hand. He arranged that to happen, because if this had happened, it would have been a total distraction for me. And I'd have been so encumbered, but he's relieved me of that. Wow. And then you become more confident then that, well, if I just keep dedicating myself and committing to this process of Krishna consciousness, everything that's happening will be auspicious. And that's one of the beginnings of devotional service, is that we become more aware. It is the beginning of auspiciousness. Just like you can't see the sun, but the sky's starting to get light, and you're thinking, oh, this is going to be amazing when it finally rises. So you're starting to get faith. Things are starting to illuminate, So Rupa Goswami says, be enthusiastic. He says, be confident and then be patient. So you have to wait your time, The 4 sages that went to see Shadakashaya Vishnu in Svetadweep, they got there and they were doing everything right, but then they had to wait 100 years. So you could be on the threshold, you could be chanting, you could be attentive, you could be devotional, you could be following the principles, and then you just got to be patient and just wait, don't jump the gun. If there's one thing that really puts Krishna off, it's being pushy with him, It's like, okay, who's God? Am I God or are you God? Okay, so just calm down and you'll get it in due course of time. Now just wait your time and do what you're supposed to do. And don't be pushy. And then Krishna's okay. And then it actually happens faster. The less pushy you are, you can't speed Krishna up. You can't rush him to give you the mercy. If you want it to happen quickly, then you have to back off. And you have to be humble and compliant and fall in with whatever the plan is. And praying to Krishna, please let me see your hand in this. What is it I'm supposed to be learning? And then we speed up the process by doing that. Any other questions or comments? Okay, if we don't have questions or comments, I usually ask the questions. So I'll ask a question instead then. So Srila Prabhupada's drawing a distinction that this is how Krishna is and this is how the living entities are. And so we can see, well, therefore that must be God. But Doesn't the distinction also apply to all the living entities in the spiritual world? Because they don't have material bodies. In other words, what quality is being referred to here that distinguishes Krishna from the Jiva Tattva, even when the Jiva Tattva is in the spiritual world?
I guess just in this verse, there's a clear distinction between Krishna as is it Vibhu, great, and the living entity is very small, because Krishna used the reservoir of spiritual potency, it says here. So although the jiva may be experiencing spiritual bliss, still this bliss is coming from Krishna. Similarly, he's one without a second. He's realized as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, the reservoir of all knowledge. So he's a source. So although the jivas in the spiritual world are entirely connected to Krishna, they have realized there's still a distinction because they're getting their source from him.
Yeah, that's one nice point. The Krishna's the source, so they may be experiencing it, but it's emanating from Krishna. Is that the word vibhushayam? It's referring to Krishna being the source, or being the great one, vibhu.
I think vibhu means great, as far as I can remember, and anu means small.
And also at the beginning, he clarifies that Krishna is all the expansions are coming from Krishna. So obviously, no one else can do that, expand themselves like that. So that's another distinction. Any other distinctions? What qualities does Krishna have that the living entity doesn't have? Well, universes emanate from the pores of his skin. The living entity is also a trikaligya. He can also be aware of past, present, and future. And he has minute, but then there are some things that he cannot do. He cannot produce universes. So another interesting take on that, another way of looking at it, which is interesting as well, you would think, well, if Krishna is so unlimitedly powerful and I am so infinitesimally insignificant, then how can we really have a relationship? Because Krishna is always going to feel so much better than me, so much bigger than me. It's like trying to have a friendship with a giant who's 50 million miles high, and you're walking down the road with Arthur, your friend, and they say, "Who's that?" "That's Arthur. He's a big lad," but you wouldn't really be able to have an intimate relationship with him. So it's explained in the Napariyaham by Shiv Ramaj, which is really amazing, is Krishna feels inferior to the living entity. He feels like the living entity possesses something better than he has. Any idea what that could be? Yeah. And can you be more specific? Do you know, because there's a very specific failing that Krishna feels he has, and that's why he says, "I can't repay you." He says to the gopis, "I'm indebted, and I couldn't repay you in a lifetime of Brahma." Yeah. It's because of the exclusivity of their devotion, because Krishna has to take care of everybody. He's got to look out for everyone. Whereas the jiva, he's just focused single-pointedly on Krishna. And Krishna can't reciprocate with that. I can't just give myself completely just to you, because I've got to look after everybody else as well. So that's an amazing aspect, that although you would think, Krishna's overwhelmingly more powerful and more qualified than the living entity, but he feels indebted to the living entity because he can't give that single-pointed devotion like the living entity can. Which is amazing, isn't it? How the unlimited can feel inferior to the infinite, to the infinitesimal. Such a beautiful ampanam adapadam. It's like beautiful and complete. So Prabhupada says, karmis, jnanis, and yogis are full of anxiety because they want something. And that's interesting as well because we think that we're in anxiety because we haven't got the thing that we want. But what we don't realize is that's not what it is. The reason we're in anxiety is because we want the thing that we've not got, not because we've not got it. That's what the problem is. And because of that wanting problem, it means that whatever you get, you don't solve the wanting problem. It just goes on to something else. I really like that. I'd like to get a watch like him. Look at that watch. It's an Apple Watch 57. It can make toast. You can hose the garden with it. It tells you funny jokes. Oh, I'd really like one of those, I really want. So you get it. But then as soon as you get it, Apple Watch 58 comes out, which gives you a suntan while you're looking at it. And then suddenly, oh no, I really want that. I really want that. And it's always, so the problem is, what causes the anxiety is this wanting all the time. They say there's two types of people. There's the ones that want, and the ones that are just getting their happiness from within, as is. And they're saying, I'll be happy once I get this. I'll be happy once I get that. I'll be happy once I get this. But then it's always something else. And then there's those that realize, I'll be happy when I become more tolerant. I'll be happy when I become more grateful. I'll be happy when I become kinder. I'll be happy when I become more respectful. So this is where the real happiness is based, because the wanting never really gets solved. And how can it really? Because even if you get what you want and you've got your little cottage by the sea with all the little roses around the door, and you've got everything's perfect, how long does it last anyway? Even if I'm satisfied now, I've got the cottage, I've got the wife, I've got the perfect kids, I'm A-okay. And then it's all decomposing before your very eyes. Everything's falling apart and wrinkling and sagging. When you're cleaning a room, you know what the dust is? It's skin. It's bits of skin coming off you. So we're all just like decomposing. We're all just like walking dust bags. And we're disintegrating. And then we're thinking, I'm going to be so happy when I get this bag of dust. And we get married and we have a few little bags of dust and everything's going to be so good, But the whole thing's just breaking down.
Thank you, Prabhu, for the class. Very nice points. So, somewhat I can understand that, like a bag of dust and this material body is full of miseries. Sometimes I struggle to keep this as a sustainable motivation within myself and push myself for doing good japa. So what should I imbibe in my practice that gives me a more sustainable motivation?
Well, interestingly enough, if you want knowledge to be steady, then there has to be purification. There's two things. There's the accumulation of information, which we generally consider to be knowledge, and there's also where you're situated in the modes of material nature. So if you're in Sattva Gun, then all the gates are illuminated by knowledge. Eyes, nose, everything you're smelling, tasting, interacting with, you're seeing it in its proper perspective. So that's in the mode of goodness. So it may be that you hear this information and it seems interesting, but you're not able to retain or implement because the consciousness isn't pure enough. And if you're in the mode of ignorance, then it means very quickly I'll be covered over again. If you're even able to connect with the knowledge in the first place in the mode of ignorance, you may not be able to really assimilate you may not be able to really get the gist of what that was all about, you know. Like they took the kids in Glasgow at 16 down to the abattoir to show them what's going on. The teacher thought, well, if they're going to eat meat, they should make an informed decision. And on the spot that day, 40% went vegetarian. And some of them didn't, because it's like, you know, they just didn't connect with what was really going on, you know. So depending on the mode that you're in determines how you perceive something and then how you apply that. I mean, how many people have got Prabhupada's books and they can read it and it doesn't click, you know? Unless they have some sukriti, some piety, then they cannot assimilate the information and implement it. And that sukriti is something which has to be acquired either in this lifetime or in previous ones for us to become eligible for receiving the knowledge. The knowledge goes in on the intellectual platform, and then the implementation is when it goes into the heart. And that's when the knowledge actually becomes realized, you know. That you can know something, but then you have to be able to feel something. Like the kids at the abattoir, they felt that this wasn't a good idea, you know. So it was more than just knowing something. So how to be able to feel that Krishna is God, how to be able to feel that I'm Krishna's servant, how to be able to feel that I'm not the enjoyer, I'm not the controller. What does that feel like? Feeling is more powerful than just thinking. And willing, actually, a lot of the willing goes on because of how we feel. So how do we invoke the right devotional sentiment? And then if we're feeling the right way about Krishna, and we're feeling the right way about devotional service, we're feeling positive and enthusiastic and confident, optimistic, then we've more chance of Swayameva Sparatyada, we've more chance of Krishna manifesting. Krishna is actually the absolute truth. And along the way, we have other truths. And for some people, it's very difficult for them to accept the truth. They just struggle with the truth. So if they struggle with relative truth, they're really going to struggle with absolute truth. So along the way, the path that paves the way to the absolute truth are becoming more and more aware of the relative truths, more and more aware of our real position, our real situation, what's really going on in the environment around us. In the 7 habits, there explains 2 paradigms that are going on. And they say you can't change until you change your paradigm. So the 2 paradigms are the way things are and the way things should be. And it's not necessarily that either of them are correct. And so real knowledge means to become aware of the way things really are and the way things really should be. And that's why it's so important that we read the books to be able to conjure up these 2 paradigms in the proper perspective. You know, this is how I should be seeing something. This is a sense object, and this is how I should see the sense object. This is a difficulty, and this is how I should see the difficulty. ISKCON Guru in the key. Srila Prabhupada ki. Go Premanandi. Haribol.
Jai.
All of you ki jai.